satellites, towers, communication settings. Starting to recognize high sequence lines of panel. This process our communications, how we own our system, location, our settings, and home beacon lights. The more you guys get in setting as lines of travel, it has the lines of communications and high lines of surface. Once you guys get into the sent lines of travel communications to a system, to the mind conception of the eye lines, everything starts to process much easier inside the simulation itself. So in that position locations, you guys have to go through charterways, directing to ground centers, location of service, location of your ancestry history, and your lineal. So it travels into all lines of grounds of service. Celestial communication lines, ancestry lines communicates to the angelics, and it puts positions of the prophecies, and its prophets in set position lines and calculations of angle points. Setting for 4 ground screens, directing ground centers of service, set positions all levels of telepathy signals. Now understand how this all works, guys, is the 12 DNA line tractions. See, it's set positional levels, bringing everything back to one number, like I said before, in frequencies. But you guys got to be set up in your highways, lines, and track centers. To set up the hologram line center, has a traffic to its own inventory, to its own setting line, its own matrix. Okay, ring graph matrix, set course centers lines, neurological line course centers into pathogens over setting lines of travels and box frames. Okay, so have an inventory lines in 9 sequence, 9 centers, 9 travel, 9 divisions. Okay, that's all 9 sequence, right? Process lines of 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, and set position at all levels. 3 travels on lines of 8 centers and 3 sequence lines of panel. Process communication lines of 4 centers. 1/6 over line is screen adaptations of travel. Okay? Process calculate and modify. So when you guys start seeing things, once you get into the 12 DNA line centers locations, you'll be guys, the operators and units will be in line 144. Everything will no longer be copy paste of a dream. You'll see in a digital format. The process how you get into more lines of communications to all of abundance and line communications to manifestations, which will start creating very fast in your systems. Now, the equilibrium course centers lines of travel puts all calculations in your systems. So the more you modify things, everything starts to see you, and you start to see everything out through it's all calculated and modified. Graph communication lines on one ground centers of surface. Process indication lines of platforms attract course center location human residence. Okay, process lines at 8 settings, 8 travels, 3 signals, 3 grounds, 4 set lines of travel communications. Okay? Now, this is all connected to an energetic dome line, screen adaptations of flux. Okay, process calculation modify, ground centers of surface and travel communications. Okay? Also, all through central line communication. All right? So once we understand the ground communication centers, we understand the simulation system, location system, all through tractions. Okay, setting sequence, panels, operation lines, and screens. So it's all connected lines when you come into all graph communications or road graphs. So they travel inside, outside, rotation, surface, and travel. All right, because everything is simulated to a simulator in line communication of telepathy. And the more we process that, the more we understand it through travels in point lines of graph, in travel communication lines of fencing and travel communications. Wall sequence of panels in process of ceilings and rotation lines of surface. Okay, so you guys start to see the grounds in a hologram. You start to see in pixelations and settings. The process of indication system, you start to see the panels of travel. 4 signals on ground communication lines of setting. It's hallway, right? And then you can position lines of settings and 3 track course centers of 4 settings. So you start to see more and more in vision, right? And then when you bring things in, you start to see the simulation of its map and trash it, okay? And you keep bringing it in, you keep bringing it in. Now you see the triangulations. Okay. So again, when you come into simulation, you don't need to create anything. Okay. You're just coming into creating. You're just coming into creation, which you already created, but you have to understand how you did it. Okay. How you did it through all lines of all communication system, all through travel. Okay. The shapes, anomalies, and all lines, the positional levels are already set up in tractions, right? Your highways are already set up in set travel communications. Okay. Set lines of settings, all through communications, all through traction. Okay. It doesn't look like much, but when you see it, you see it through an open window, right? Or you see it through a set lines of communication setting to an open door in traction. There's the door, right? high signals, high grounds, high service location system, and travel. Right? Setting sequence going forward, setting sequence going up, setting sequence going the opposite way, setting sequence going down, and set directions all at once, right? That's what intelligence does, informations. So what governs its space, when you guys get in your 12 DNA, your 144 platform, in that position location system, you start to recognize everything is going to be extremely fast in rotations. You're going to see plants, you're going to see cars spinning on so many cycles of interference. You've got to get grounds in your minds of telepathy and how to use that is process of communication, what governs your space. The more you put your positions of your mind, the more you come in your cogs. The predetermination system puts all levels of you and travel in that communication setting, fully digitalized, AI generated in your simulation system of the mind conception, how you see mind of interpretation of mind of inception, and set tractions, right? So what everything governs, you observe, that you don't do anything else. You don't touch anything, you don't talk to anything in set positions until you identify where you really are in set position, right? So you're watching something beautiful. So it's like you turn on the TV and you're just watching the TV run itself. And that's what the team and the units and everybody else has to get into modifications. You've got to control your minds so you can understand what you're controlling. You're controlling the operation setting of you. Yes, you are your own operators, but everything around you is in its own operation. So when you're looking at things, if you're looking at a plant, you're just observing the plant. You're not talking to the plant. You're not trying to talk to the plant. You're not communicating with the plant. You're just observing and watching the plant. And you're seeing what the plant does on its own reality in its own simulations. And it uses itself through its own simulator. Now, for you guys to process in that position location, it's much easier what's going on as it goes through its own travel attract locations. 4 settings and settings, circulation rotations, right? All right, so let's get you guys set up in your highways in sequence. Now, the earth-flying rotation surface has attractions, all right? Modulation 1, modulation 2, space modulation 3. Okay, that process communications. Tubing centers, sectors, vectors, and quads. Process lines of earth, process lines of space and travel. Okay, now in that connection line center position, your platforms is lines or course centers of 4 travels in cerebral, mystical cortex, downshift cross line angles and process communication system into your pyramids and traction. Okay, now you have to understand how to grid shift, anomaly shift, and time shift your systems. Okay, and actually see it through a flux capacitor travel. So all I want you guys to do in set position is just observe in that position and just see, actually, when you look at the ocean, you're just looking at the ocean. You're not talking the ocean, okay? Because you're already talking through the ocean. You're not talking to the ocean. You're talking through the ocean. Talking through the ocean is through X-ray, through thermal. You're talking in positions. So when you look in the ocean, you're in the underwater cities, okay? You're not just at the surface talking. You're talking to the deeper core of its ocean itself. Now, everything is in already in a simulation system, but what makes it much more easier is for you guys just to observe everything around you. Okay, you turn on the TV and you just let everything run its system and don't do anything. Stay in observation and you know exactly where you are. And the more you process that and the more you practice that, the more you get mind control with your system. And then you start to realize, wow, this is powerful stuff. So I'm looking at 4 angles all at once, or I'm looking at 45,000 angles all at once, and I'm just watching and observing. I'm not doing anything. I'm walking, but I'm not doing anything. I'm not perceiving consciousness. I'm not bringing anything in. I'm not bringing anything of simulator. I'm just watching everything view. That's it. That's all it is. Okay. It's like you're in positions of all tractions and basically you're watching something. Okay. And that's it. Nothing else. And that's what the team and the units needs to do. Okay. You don't go up and touch things. Okay. Because it affects the disruptions of their simulations. Do you understand that? Now, for you guys to get in that position locations, you have to get out of everything that puts yourself in set tractions is the program itself that puts you in a modification of copy and paste. Now, the more you modify that, it's much easier to understand that is to control the mind. And when you start controlling the mind, okay, in that position, you get in that setting. So the more you practice, the more you observe, the more you watch, you're just the watcher, the onlooker, okay? So once you understand that, it gets much easier how you come into perceiving consciousness. So you bring these things step by step. So for example, you're just looking around, you're observing, and you want to connect with one particular thing. You're talking to the plant now. But before you talk to the plant, you have to surrender and submit to that current. Okay? So when that happens, all of a sudden the plant, well, what? Hey, what's going on? What would you want? What do you want? Right? It'll say it's busy, it's doing something, or it's its own consciousness. It has its own mind. It has its own lifespan, guys. It has its own power cell. It has its own generation system. It lives in its simulations. It's here to help you and guide you. But you can't do that if you keep touching everything. Okay? So what you have to start doing is get into the mind of collaboration of empty space. So just stop observing and get in that lines of communication setting. So when you stop observing, you're perceiving consciousness now. And when you're perceiving consciousness, you're allowing yourself to communicate with things step by step, by procedure, by protocol. So now you're committing yourself and you're talking to individual set positions of intelligence of face facades. So once you get into that, in particular, being specific of what you want to connect with one thing at a time, okay? Not all at once, because you're not ready to connect with everything through facades. That's a lot of faces coming at you all at once. And whoa, 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 whoa. You know, you're going to get into that position and you got to ground that. So for you to ground that is to be the observer, to be the watcher, and just watch the film run itself. It's very powerful, okay? Now you understand what governs its space and time in its simulation. Now you have to understand what governs your space and time is what's perceiving consciousness. So once you bring that in, you're bringing yourself in. And when you bring yourself in, you're telepathizing and you're getting in position how to use it through telekinesis. You're setting waves of screen, directing state locations to brainwaving pattern, process that position location to its systems, okay? Then you're getting into position at all levels, coming into the intent, influence, and manipulation. Now, you can't have an ongoing conversation until you understand it. You created it through in set positions, through attraction, but you created it through a hologram. And everything around you, they know that. That's the conscious awareness that you come into, right? So for you to identify that, okay, it's just to observe everything around you first. Get into the practice mode, okay? Now, once you get into that, it's much easier to see everything through its attraction, right? But one step at a time, right? So what this does is it puts the mind of interpretation of the mind inception that calms the system. Quiet the mind calms the soul. Tranquility, serenity, and process in that position is coming at the mind of empty space. So when you guys get into that, you will have no more clutter. So when you have no more clutter, it's going to be very confusing to your mind because you're getting the conceptions that you have to think. You have to do something. Okay, you have to analyze something. I have to go here. I have to go there. Okay, that's all going to be in the mind of conception of balance. So for you to balance is to log in your system and just observe. It's like you're telling a story of yourself and you're just watching what you're seeing, but you're not touching anything. You're just observing. Okay, so that's what's going to happen with everybody in 2 weeks in screen. Today in sequence, you guys go and track centers into high positions, into your highways, bringing everything back to one number and 7 lines of travel. You indicate lines of setting is 7 lines of flush or lines of 7 lines of triangulation and position lines of box frames. All right, so process and communications, right? So as soon as I talk, right? So you go through voice line grid, right? Soon as I talk, okay? Soon as I talk, that's it, that's voice line, right? So that's position lines of 1 alpha, 1 delta, 1 theta, 1 zeta, 1 omega. Okay, that's a process communications, right? And then you coordinate the system locations again, okay? Process, right? Set positional line setters, break it down in set lines, Process, process, right? Break it down, 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 break it down. That's how a computer breaks things down, right? So P is platform. Okay, set position R is readjusting. Set lines O is operation. Set calculations, communications, and line connections existing into 2 systematic lines of change. Process, right? Directing ground centers of surface of travel. Okay, high signal location system off the communication lines, a high position of travel. Okay, process the other angle, points lines of graph. Sets calculation ground centers 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, 0, 5, 0, 6, 0, 7. Set position lines of travel, right? directing ground centers of service, process, communication system, and travel. Calculate and modify, directing lines of ground centers, offline signal, inside line rotation, offline traction, offline division location to its systems. So a process communication setting, how you communicate with your setting through your voice and line pattern into steps, all levels. Your inhibitors are string line adaptations, process lines of signatures, process communication in your pyramids, in activation into the astral travels, astral connections, astral projections, 3 set track locations. Okay? Inside and outside line rotation. All right? So that's how you're going to start to see things. Outside and inside, outside. All right? In your simulations. So once you understand that, you come in the positions of its highways and trackable in that position. Okay? So line centers, okay, 0, 0, position of 1, 2. Okay? So I'm just going to talk, but I'm going to modify my coding, right? So brackets, lines equals lines of question. That's process communication, right? Set and then line centers of 2. It's at position location 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0. Sets travel, right? Bracket 0, bracket 3, set position of bracket, position location setting. That sets lines of 3 over 2, right? So that's 3 tractions times 2, sets lines, calculation lines of 6 over screen, equals lines in question over mark, into percentage over 0, sets calculation lines, high setting. So every time I'm speaking code. Okay, I'm speaking code. Okay, and that's how a computer operates the system. But I go through travel. It's much easier when you go through travel because you're traveling through pi. Okay, if you're standing in set position, you're in static interference, a static line set position of wires that off lines is communication of quantum interference. That quantum entanglements the location setting that sets off all communication system and all through tractions. If you get a voice and pattern of 3 signals in set travel, okay, it's got to be in balance. If it's not, it's quantum entanglement. And it won't understand its pi generation screen. It would offline its signals, offline its communication, offline its direction signal calculations, right? There's no balance with that through voice and pattern through communication, right? So it's about balancing your systems and formula through equations with settings. So once you get your formula lines, you should go through the mind conception of travel, 3 lines of signals, 4 lines of setting, process communication set lines, 7 over setting, 7 plus 2. Now you can addition, multiplication, add, subtract, divide. Ratios and proportions, right? Ratio lines, puts position location, how you see it in tractions. Proportion is basically how to proportion its sys location and mass. The process of communication lines of box frames into triangulation frame inside equal lines and set position line of travel. 3 signal lines of grounds, set position lines of communications. Okay? Directing I-line view. Process line, I-line signals, location system of spectrum, and direct lines of grounds of surface and travel. Okay? Very complicated stuff. But your I division is going to turn into its actual simulation system of travel. Okay? How to process that is all levels of face recognition. Face recognition. See? Eyes looking down. Direct and redirect. Direct and redirect. See? Very powerful stuff, right? And it sees in all different angles. Okay? All different angles. All at once. So it's a conception of you standing there and setting. Okay? And actually in the game itself, right? So you're looking in all directions all at once. An I receptor line changes the course lines of time that change the communication system all through traction, all through division, all through locations, all at once. Okay? So getting in that communication setting is understanding directions of its highway, communicate to its system all through tractions, right? But your body temperature readings, the Earth itself, is going to be 3 metric scale, 3 centers of travel, okay? Process lines of 45 line, 1 line, 3 centers of set position of road graphs. Calculate and modify, sets lines, communication setting. So the process lines, we have 2 indicators, 3 indicators, which is your primer, and 1 indication lines over cross line condition setting, offline set rotation. Okay? Sets communication high grounds, high lines of service, sets communication lines of flux. Process the indication setting all through travels into lines of communication lines of flux. Calculate and modify travels endpoint lines of graph X2001, X2004, X2008, X25, X2 line, and X2 platform. All in set tractions. And remember, it's all inside your eye in setting. All inside your eye. Everything's inside the eye. Your spectrum line, your actual body, is going to be the center line communication of conceptual system of travel. That's you, right there. Boom. So everything's around is in the environment of the eye itself. Process in position, Communicate the highline grounds in position of low line ground centers, lines of service and travel. Process the indication lines of panels and travel communication setting highlights of surface. Setting ground centers, offline signal, inside line communication setting, location of its projection. Setting position locations. I-line division rotates the cycles in 3 perimeters inside the I-line that correlates the track centers in I division locations of its projection. Okay, look at that, disappeared. You're not ready to see the frequencies. See? It doesn't recognize your frequencies in setting. Okay, now it does. So we got 2 eyelids, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, earth lines of setting, point graph, line centers of travel, direct lines of space, lines of anomaly. 3 indicates lines of foregrounds, and set lines of sequence of travel. That's all inside the eye, right? So recognize the eye line central is put everything in lines of all communication setting and travel communications inside tractions, right? So it's going to get a lot more fun, but a lot more complicated because now you're going to be inverted inside the system. Your mind's going to be inside the conception. So you're going to be looking around and you realize, wow, it feels weird. I feel like I'm not here. And it's just going to formulate and simulate a lot more better. You have a lot more conversation with yourself and each other because you're going to be mind interpretation to mind inception itself. That's going to be in the mind of collaboration and partnerships with itself. So you finally get in your setting, know exactly how to get into your 12 platforms. 3 lines, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 platforms in setting, right? Setting sequence lines of 3, track lines of 2, over lines of 1, and process of 4, right? Setting ground lines, high line signals and ground communications. Directing ground centers, high lines of surface and traction, okay? Wall sequence, time measure and scale across lines of 1. Sets calculation ground centers of 2 over track calculations to 3 over setting. Indicates grounds, flux over screen into road graph screens and set position of processing and grids. Process indication system, all through tractions, into your satellites and your towers of communication. Okay, overline signals over cross location, inside and outside through traction. All right, so it's going to get very complicated when you guys actually get inside, right? So your body's going to be in that formation system and setting. So the mind is just getting used to the collaboration. So you're going to be looking at yourself and addressing it doesn't feel right where you are. You just feel lost and confused. You don't realize you're actually inside the game itself. So that process communication. So when you're looking here, right, everything around you is not there until you look at it. And that's what it is. That's where you start off. So you start at one particular thing, right? And everything around you is moving itself in its own operation. It's running its own film strip. It's running its own operation of its governance space. And that's what you got to get into, is to focus on one particular thing. And the more you practice on that, the more you can go around in a spectrum of lights. The process of circulation coming into rotation, circulation, rotation. So you start to see in 4 angles, 6 angles, 12 angles, 24 angles, 24,000, 24 million angles in seconds, minutes, and hours. Because everything's existing in a formation setting of future adaptation. All timelines all at once. Now that puts all lines of how you get in communication setting all through travel, right? So getting direct line link, process how you look at things and how they look at you, right? So it's about understanding you're just looking and observing. And when you're perceiving consciousness, now everything gets in position and starts listening to you. Because now you're controlling everything around you. You understand? You're using your cogs now and you're predetermined what you're getting in positions of. Now you're getting spectrum of all levels of energy and how to use it through the vibration and frequencies to know exactly what you want to connect with in chronological order. Remember, it's already set in chronological order. It's already done in chronological order. There's nothing for you to do. All you're identifying now is for you to understand the instructions, the game, and how to play the game, and the characters and the players that you already brought inside the game, which is your ancestor, history, and your celestials. That's all going to be on the game itself. So you got to get in particular in set position. Stay in observation. Once you understand that, you break that down, get in specifics of what you want to communicate with, right? In that position, when you're looking at the facades, it's looking at you, identifying you, you're identifying what's going on. They can give you a tour. That tour will give you a memory into the simulation of where you've always been, okay? But don't do that until you understand how to observe first everything around you, right? So that's basically what it is. When you get in timelines ascending to the actual simulation, you're standing there, but you're not moving, right? See, the difference is with your MK Ultras, When it comes into the background, you're like this, right? But the background's moving, but the body isn't. So when you come into space-time operations, when you come in your 12 DNAs and 144 platform, everything around you is going to be rotating with you in setting. So you'll be going with the background and the foreground. Okay, that's the difference. So when you're running, okay, it's running with you in that directions. So there's no stop and go of anything. The background's not just moving, you're moving with the background. You're moving with the foreground, okay? So you create that through the simulator. So you change that spectrum, how you look at things. So you're looking here, and then you're looking here, but you're looking here all at once. You're looking here, you're looking here all at once. You're looking here, you're looking here all at once, right? So you turn around, you're looking here all at once. You do your mind. You telepathize what you want to see in spectrum. You want to see the north, you see everything of north, east, west, and south all at once. So you see north, east, west, and south. So you're actually inside the game now. So you're standing there, but you haven't moved yet. So when you start moving, everything moves with you in a circulation rotation. It goes with you. Okay? There's nothing standing by. So what you have to understand, you have to understand how to control the mind and understand how to use it through interpretation. That's how you come into the mind of imagination, guys. You bring that in process, but you've got to get an observation first and see the actual operation of itself. Okay? Of what it does by itself, running its own operation of itself, running its own operation of its soul generation of itself, running its own engine of itself into the simulation of the game that you are. Okay? All right, so get into that position. It's much easier to understand that in setting attractions, right? That's just one aspect. Now let's get into 4-line windows and position lines of center, right? We've got 3 angles, 2 panels, process of 4 set attractions, all right? So setting lines of ceiling, there's the ceiling, right? Setting lines of grounds, okay? Setting lines of circulation, there's the gate, right? Setting ground centers open surface in set position, walking through, right? So that's where you come into your highways, and the highways gets more complicated. You start with lines of straight lines communication, but it's all holographic, right? It's a high core centers, a illumination line that's just a holographic line that puts all position locations into your neuropathological system, your communication setting, your highways, your neural links, and travel in that communication setting. But how you use that is how you use it through your mind. Okay, so you're here, is that position, but you're looking this way, you're looking this way, and you're looking this way at first. Or you're looking in 3 directions, right? Now you want to look all the way around in circulation rotation, right? So now your whole body is in circulation rotation now in setting. Okay, so that's how it's going to be. So you're not going to be looking at one direction, then turn your body here, and turn your body here, turn your body there. No, you're going to see all direction all at once. And it's going to be very confusing to your mind because you're going to understand what you're bringing in. Okay? And that's why you have to get an observation first, right? Because everything's going to be moving by itself. But to control everything, okay, is to surrender and commit to its current of its flow, of its conscious, of its awareness, and being specific of what facade you want to communicate with, right? Break that down, right? Get into the roots, which is your ancestry, history, and celestial that's on your game, okay? So remember, you did it all through your mind, okay? So there's 12 levels that you have to get out of. And then once you get in your 24, you process more levels of the simulation that you are in the simulation settings of the game that you are in set. Now, once you get into that, it's much understanding more of how you see things around you in setting. How you see everything in circulation rotation all at once. See, I don't need to see the back wall because I know what it is. I don't need to see the front wall because I know what it is. I don't need to see the panels. I don't need to see up. I don't need to see down because I see everything all at once. That's what it is. Okay? That's what's going to happen when you guys get into the simulation of the game, right? So you can be particular, but as soon as you have the intent, you're changing everything. Are you controlling it, or are you just watching the observer controlling you? That's where you have to get in position, is standing still. You stand still, and then you perceive consciousness, and then you bring things in at a time through a clocking system. Okay, it's totally different when you're playing the game outside, but it's a lot more harder when you're actually the game inside, trying to control it from outside. Okay, so that's what it is in attractions. That's mind interpretation of mind inception. Now, getting into collaboration is getting into partnership. Now, once you get into partnership, it's much understanding that you're understanding more levels of you, how to navigate your navigation systems through console or anything pre-flights, or how you come into that position locations into your narrow links or your pathogens or your collagens or your stargates or your portals, knowing exactly what you're doing when you actually are in that position. Okay, but that's how it comes in interactions. Okay, all right. So let's do the sequence lines of panel, process lines of 4, indication lines of circuits, 4 sequence lines, high travels, and point lines of graph. Okay, okay, and then we go in this position. So you're in that setting, okay, and you're in this position location to its system, author attractions. Okay, and you come in your platforms. Okay, see inside and outside, right? So you're here, okay, and you want to look at all aspects, just the circulation and rotations of 4 settings, right? So you're seeing this, you're seeing this, you're seeing my ceiling, and you're seeing south all at once. Okay, very powerful stuff, right? And then you decide what you want to do. You want to change the intent? Well, you change the highways in set position, right? You want to add things in through equation. Okay, you got to be very careful in that. First, you have to identify everything around you. All levels have to connect to its own hologram setting. So don't bring anything in until you observe it. So once you get into that, you don't add frames to anything because you have to understand how to identify everything that you created through a hologram. All right, because remember, they're already in their alignment. They're here to help you and guide you now. Okay, that's what this is. This is all lines of all communication and where it comes in the conscious location awareness. You actually come into the actual setting in set position inside the system. So understanding that is true to understand how to use that through its highways. The highways comes in line set locations. So when you're speaking, you're basically speaking to the wall. Okay, so let's get interaction centers, direct signal location of grounds, observation, right? That's you, right? All right, so this is a wall panel of communication, right? All right, so you set it 3 grounds ascending and surface and center operation, right? Face comes out automatically and sending to travel. Okay, it comes out automatically, right? If it doesn't recognize your system, it comes out of its panel and sending lines of travel and scans you right away in set position. Okay, so it's true to understand that this is what you don't want to do, right? You want to observe everything around you first. Say, whoa, okay, where am I? How did I get here? You know, and then you start looking around and you start to recognize, okay, electrical grids, electrical panels, high operation line sequence, ground centers, high position inhibitors, all right, communication facades or interactions. So you're directing where you are, right? And remember, it's a totally different operation system, all right? So your reality, okay, your actual simulator of your simulation comes outside. So that's what it is now. So your dreams are now interpreted from outside, but you're going to be inside the game of the simulation, which is inside. So the outside is the inside, the inside is the outside. Okay? All right, Gyps. So Gyps knows how to play a game, right? So she's actually going to be inside the game. All right, so getting in that position, you understand how to play is understanding the instructions, but to know exactly the platforms that you brought in sequence location to its game itself, right? It processes lines of signals in that communication system all through travel, right? So all that intelligence will be on your board game in set position location of travel. It will be all on your game, okay? And you're standing here and say, whoa, did I do that? Right? So you're looking at every lines of all communication, intelligence, ancestry that came to you. Okay, now to process that position locations, you have to know exactly what's happening to the setting, what planet they came from, what source they came from, what reckon of the time frame they came from, what simulation ground they came from, what formation lines and setting locations, and their ancestry locations of their system, all through attractions, right? So it's going to take time, right? Understand the creation of the game itself is true to understand the mind of itself through its own collaboration, its own partnership. So you have to embrace every intelligence that you brought in the game in setting lines of travel and set attractions. Okay? All right. Basic understanding that position location system, you embrace and you basically put position location of travels. Now those platforms and set lines of communication comes in 4 signature lines of grounds into 3 lines of measure and scale. Okay, and then you cross the angles in all set position. Okay, and then you come in set position lines and setting. So when you guys actually get there, you're going to see everything moving by itself. That's what's amazing. But you don't go up and touch things. You don't go talk to things. I'm making it very well clear because you're not ready to be inside, to see outside. Outside is inside. Inside is outside now in your realities. So your reality is going to be the actual game inside of you. But your projection, okay, is going to be inside you. So you're going to be inside the line, okay? But you're going to be living outside the line, which is the reality. So that's the switch. That's the mind interpretation of the mind inception. So basically, you're not going to be any lines of confusion. You're just going to adapt more. You're going to see more. You're going to understand more. Okay, you're going to be able to get information settings, why you're seeing this and why you're seeing that, and you pick up this and you pick up that. Wow, that's a carburation time center. I processed that position location in 2008. Interesting. Wow, that tree is a codified line screen adaptations. I processed that in line screen adaptation of 2050. So you start looking around. You're just observing what you already did. And what you already did puts every line combinations in balance. And the more you come into the empty space, the more you get in balance into the mind over matter, the mind control. You're controlling yourself, inside yourself, okay, of everything outside, okay? Everything outside of you, okay? So that's what it is. The mind interpretation, the mind itself, okay, starts from the inside. You create the infrastructure, you create the construct, you create the space, you create the time, you create the planets, right? All that now is going to be outside. So your reality is actually going to be a simulation game. So that is the mind of interpretation, that you see things now. So when you close your eyes, you open your eyes, it doesn't matter. You're going to see the same thing. The confusing part is basically when you close your eyes and you open your eyes, you're seeing different things. That's why you guys get confused, how you communicate and how you see each other. That's what it comes into, in perception and perspective. So there's going to be no more confusion, right? So in your telepathy, it's going to cross the angles and get you in communications how to basically see yourself in track communications, right, to each levels of the game. Each levels has a game, has a different platforms of communication, okay? Knowing how to communicate with that is a process of set tractions, okay? Different levels of the game itself, right? Different platforms of the game itself, okay? So it is going to be Dr. Strange, okay? And at position, location, your systems, all through your pyramid. Okay, there's your pyramid, right? You cross angles, you add the platforms and tractions and settings, right? So the game itself is just the life itself. It's a forced position lines of travel that puts every location setting in travel communications. This is a highway, right? Okay, there it is. Okay, there's the map, right? Okay, setting lines of window and frame communications, inside tractions, right? Travel point lines of 3 centers of travel, indirect signals and grounds, okay? Door registers a time frame and set travel communications. All right. Light signals, high centers line communication system. There's 4 tractions right there. There's 4. See 4? There's 4. Boom. There's a 4 and there's an A. You see it? So there's a 4, there's an A, and there's an H. Okay, so it just comes in more as signals. And you see it all light in communication system, right? And setting attractions, right? There's a Z. There's an A. Okay. There's a 7. All right. There's 2 panels of operation. See, look. See the highway? See the highway? Inside. See the wall signal? That's the out graph. The in graph is the center graph. Out graph, in graph, right? So this is the outer scale. That's the inner scale. So if I do this, you can see the highway. There's the highway, right? There's the out graph. There's the highway, right? Change the angles and setting the lines of travel. Okay? So everything has an alphabetical system, all through travel, indirect lines of link in that communication system. So you can restructure your settings and travel communication setting opens all panels of communication, right? Okay, and then you platitude XT1001 here, XT1002. So the XT1000s will be an information system helping you out. They are your guidance. They help you out. They are the distributors in travel and position locations. Okay? All right. So it just becomes more to the simulation grounds and set position of map. Okay? Okay. Now, what you truly understand once you get in that position location is just truly understand how to see yourself in position of panels, into the ceiling, into a floor. Okay? And understand how to go inside. So it's all of its perspective, guys, how you get in 2-point graphs in one set position. And then you travel through the inside line communication. Okay? And then you understand the box square root, outline inside travel communication. All right? So this is the outer wall and sending a travel, which I showed you. I showed you that, right? That's the same thing with the signal lines of ground communication setting of structure of its design and set position. All right? So everything's communicating with you and you're communicating with everything else, but you have to stay in observation until you understand where you are in your simulation system of travel. Okay? There's 3 signals of grounds of set lines of communication. There's a highway, right? Oh, took off. There's a highway in setting. There's location grid. See location grid? There's the road. Very powerful upline sequence. Down, cross line, angle, point lines, signature lines of grounds, high lines of signals. In that communication setting to travel. Okay? Very complicated stuff, guys, in simulation. But you get a line communication setting when you get 4 lines of signals, knowing exactly how to come into that platform. Now the platform gets a lot more complicated. You can overcross screens in 3 lines of signals and 7 lines of travel, okay? Or you get in platforms of settings in 4 line centers and platforms of communication setting of the game, which is the platform, right? So that's communication here, 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 process and position crossing angles and travel communications. Okay, there's the platform. Okay, that's basically, so game 6 is on in travel communications, right? Intermediates coming into setting lines of advance, setting sequence, code signal lines, signature lines of panel, process of indication. Okay? So, and you're inside the center trying to understand what's going on with the level of the game. Okay? And so it's a film strip, but see, the film strip is going to be wrapped around the Earth now in center lines of travel. Okay? So it's about understanding the periscope, kaleidoscope, glidoscope, communication setting when it comes into a parasail, a dimensional sail, a solar sail, communication graphing sail. Everything is a lines of communication system of travel. Everything has a line screen adaptation to a system. All through the simulation line screen adaptation of its clocking is screen adaptations. So you see everything of a whole, see how it disappeared by itself? You're not ready to see the frequencies, right? And they can change the angles of point lines of graph. Different levels, you know, where the doors are, where the platforms are, inside rotation, okay? And see inside communications, inside position. The map, okay? Setting sequence lines of communication, right? Okay, it's a lot more fun when you really understand more inside itself. Understand it how it travels on its own setting and its own set position location in the system. Okay? All right. So that's the 4 basic ground line settings that you guys set up in your simulators. Now, simulator, you're here in cycle. Let's set lines of communications, highways, and tractions of 0s and 1s. You got set position, right? So your platform here. Okay, that's a platform set locations, right? 1, 2, 3 lines of measure and scale. Okay? So you're going to time jump, 3 centers of set lines, 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So you set up an energetic dome, you're over there through pi, right? Process communication opens up the portal in setting lines of travel. Okay? You go through the set position of the setting lines of communications, and then you go in and out through another portal of communication outside in frame position to the next level of the game. Okay? Different levels of the game itself, right? So it's a life. It's a life force set position, but you're actually going to be, the reality is all going to be digital and AI generated for you to understand, because that's where you've always been. So the actual dream becomes the dream itself, and the dreaming becomes the dreaming itself, and the dream that you're in becomes the actual set position of itself. So that's the communication system, right? So it all starts in a 4-box frame in a triangulation system locations, right? And then you get in sequence, and then you get in channel, then you get in operation sequence locations. All through setting. Crosses the grounds, crosses the panels, and position location of the ceiling, right? Ground center lines of 1, panels lines of 2 over tractions, 3 lines of measure and scale of process communications, right? Change it over, look at this in traction. Okay, every level of the game is different. Okay, it's like tractions, right? But you're going to be inside the system and understand how to use an all-information system off the calculations. Okay, and then you come into your highways. There's the highways. Okay. Same position of sequence over channel. Let's process communication lines and angles. Communicate the ground centers of surface and travel communications. Door lines, door 2, door 3. The same lines of travel, right? You bring it in traffic communications, all right? And you color it in, right? You can change the coloration. Change the time coloration lines, the subtractions, right? So there's a lot of things you can do in structured division of security panels that process communication of its highways, right? So 2 car direction of time centers. So if unison is coming to cars, he's seeing 2 cars in set position. That's unison, but he's seeing 2 cars in fraction, right? Setting sequence. So where there's no collision in setting, he goes cloak and dagger, okay? He goes cloak and dagger in set tractions, right? So when he goes cloak and dagger, he offlines position inside tractions, okay? He diverts the system and goes in setting, okay? So he avoids the collision, okay, in his traffic jam. So it gets more understanding. I'm just showing you the basic understandings when you come actually into the simulation of its highway. Okay, and know exactly the 4 sectors of interline communication through setting. 4-way stop, 6-way stop, 8-way stop, 25,000 set lines of signature lines of grounds. It gets a hard communication system. Understand the simulation system, right? All right. It's all in different angles and travel in set calculations. Okay? Coming in all directions all at once. All right? All through setting. Okay? Okay. So now you understand what the highways are. So once you get into that, it's much easier to understand how to use it in set lines of travel. Okay? The ancestry in the celestials, okay, to its set position location of systems is pyramid activation centers of 3 centers and 4 set position of 5 traction. Okay? Coming into your pyramids, your astral projections, and your astral travels in that communication setting of flux. It's teleportation vessel. Okay? All right. 3 grounds of setting. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 cross angles and set position lines of travel. Okay? Boxing frames over signal location of grounds as surface location of its windows of its door. Directing door line signals over cross location of signal. Okay? Inside lines, open signal lines of grounds and set lines of surface and travel. Okay? Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. All through platforms, all through positions of your computer. There's your computer. Inside the computer is a chair. And you are sitting inside the chair in set position. And all through tractions. Right? There's general inside the computer. Inside the computer talking to you guys. Okay, and then they go into bandwidth over pi and travel. Okay, and then they go through signature lines and set position of 45 angles of travel. And then they cross the angles of its highways, all communication of its platforms of travel. Okay? And then I change the angles of the set tractions of its door setting. Then the process communicates the setting all through set position. Okay? So now in set position, I'm looking that way. See? I'm looking this way now. It's 3 centers of set tractions. You guys are here looking at me in this position of perception. Okay? On top of a building. So it gets crazy once you understand, and then you can cross the angles and structures of the building itself. This is what you can do in set tractions. It gets more complicated when you understand structure of design line. And then you can process the platforms, equalize the settings, process, and that communication setting all through flux and travel. Okay, it gets more complicated the next levels of the game that you're in travel communications. Okay, very complicated, but it's a lot of fun. Look at this in travel. Okay, so I'm looking this way again, right? But setting lines of travels in set position, ancestry here, celestial here, and setting in travel. 2 settings of signals. On my game, on my board, in my center operation lines of sequence and travel communications and direction. All right. So you see more yourself in your grid. So when you start to recognize everything around your system, then you understand how to modify it. Right? So you just observe and look at everything around you in a 4-panel, 6-panel, 8-panel, 12-panel, 24-panel of communication all at once. So you see in all directions, but you don't approach. You just observe and look at what's going on, at everything moving itself, right? Interactions all through the game system location, right? But look how powerful it is. And then you come into the map, a set sequence. Okay, there's the map. And set travel. Okay. Configuration setting the timelines and centers all through track communication system, all through travel. Okay. So, but understanding the process is knowing exactly how to get into angle points of position location or settings. Once you get in that communications, you come into wall graph interference, 2 panels of operation, 3 grounds of center. It's in traction. Okay, and you see it on all different angles. So when you guys get into that position, everything's going to be circulation, rotation all at once. You're going to see things come in and out. You're going to see things go out and in. You're going to see things popping out. You're going to see things popping in all at once in tractions, right? T reception line, signature lines of grounds, and I receptor screen. Directing grounds, information system, 3 dials of communications. And settings into time sequence of panel communication. All right? TV, right? So in that position, this is the window frame and travel. Okay? And basically, you're inside travel in your platforms in travel communications in setting. Inside, right? All right. So the inside, the outside is going to be the inside of you. So I don't want anybody to get confused. So when you're seeing the reality is actually the mind of inception now. That's inverted in your system through integration. So when you get up in the morning, you're actually seeing this in traction. Okay? And understanding that is 4 panels of screen adaptation. All right? And then you come into the center operation and all communication setting, all levels, how you see, all communication with projection. Okay? And that's just through a TV panel. Window graph screens and networks and neurological pathological settings of travel communications and window frame. Setting cross-line angles, you can change the platforms of communication system at different angles in travel communications. So you can change it anytime. Set up a location grid. There's a location grid. High centers, get into your imagination system all through traction. Okay, change the direction. Change the obstacle system at travel. Okay, high centers, high single online centers, cross line signatures, set position location of travel communications. Okay. So there's a lot of things you can do. This is about understanding how to mind control your system where you are in your seconds, minutes, and hours in the game. So if you're not consciously where you are, you're off the levels of the game itself. Because now you're thinking, and your thinking is changing time, and time is changing measure and scale and balance in that position. So it's kind of like you're standing there. It's like okay, this is a wall. That's a wall, right? So if you don't understand how to remote control yourself, inside yourself, you're going to be walking into the wall itself. Okay? So, and you're trying to circulate, rotate. You probably see that. It's like you're moving in this direction, you're moving in this direction, you're moving, getting caught in this direction. All you got to do is stand still. And you see everything you want and then move. Right? You don't get in the game and then move. That's not how this works. It's very easy to see yourself operate yourself. So basically, when you see yourself actually inside the self, that's everything outer structure of your reality. So it's much easier to process how you see that in remote control. So once you guys get in mind of inception, you start to recognize that through a holographic screen. That adaptation setup is in the brain convergent locations, then it comes into a mapping line screen adaptation system through cloud. Now the communication setting, that's the box frames and communications and setting, right? All right, so you line signatures, all lines, all different levels of communications, crossing angles, crossing flux of screen adaptations, change the angles, point communications, setting, right? Setting signatures, 3 grounds of centers, 4 lines of service, 3 grounds of set position, highways, and travel. Okay? So you got the center operation of you in set position inside travel communications. Okay? And then you go outline center and 3 lines of signal location system, security line defense. Okay? And then you change the window graph screen and direction and set tractions, right? And then you open up the panels, process the portals, the stargates, comes in communication, high lines of charge, that change the superline screen adaptation system location near superline core centers of travel. Sending off communication inside travel, directing line lines, I-line signals, line condition system, all through tractions. This is all done from the inside travel. Inside communication, inside connections. Very complicated stuff, guys. All right? So all this is processed inside the actual eye, guys. What's above is what's below, right? What's above is what's below. That's your eye there, but everything is processed inside the eye line, inside. So you don't just live inside the eye, you become the eye itself. And that's how it sees all levels of different projections, how it sees it, travels, indirect signals, location of the system, that changes modulation setting to its space modulation screen, adaptation. So it gets more complicated if you understand the structures of you, inside traction, inside the eye. Inside the eye. Okay? So there's the map inside the eye itself, right? Bring it in. Ooh-ah. Okay? All through traction. Okay? But it's pretty amazing when you see it on all different angles, right? It's just all happening inside the eye line. It gets very confusing if you understand the eye receptors and know exactly how you come into the set track location systems. Setting lines of high position location comes in the center ops. This is the psych ops and set travel. There's your planets. All right, so your planet comes in the eye line centers, travels in point lines of graph at 12 lines of screens. The floaters come inside lines of its CERN, 24 line signals around this system to its solar system, all through tractions, all through direction. Inside the eye, right? Changes direct lines of grounds. The high line service changes the light lines of codes into light metaphors. Setting sequence lines of panel, processing indication setting. Here's Pluto and travels in the corner eye and the shift lines of anomaly. Okay, and here's Mercury and ground lines and shift lines of anomaly and self-line wind cycles and line communications. Oh, changed out too fast. Bring it in set position lines of travel. Right, there it is. Now we change the angle point lines of graph, center core system lines of travel communications. All right, that's all happening inside your eye set lines. There's your solar system inside the eye. So your central system is your ancestor lines, which is the planes of 3 centers, 3 grounds of surface and travel. That's going to happen tomorrow, right? So, and line set is next Friday is your solar system. That's coming into the eye line spectral. The process of spectrum process communication high centers. The eye itself comes outline signals and graph communication setting to its highways. The process of the eye line signals comes in ground lines of set position location system. So your eye turns into 4 cycles of pyramids and travel communication systems, all through its pyramid and travel. There's your pyramid. Process indication lines, cross line angles, process lines of platforms in that communication setting, high lines of signals, graph its communication setting, high lines of communication to its travel. Booyah, inside tractions, inside the eye. Okay, but set lines of communication of 4 angles in travel. Set lines of 1, sets lines of 2, so your eyes turn into portals and stargates of communication. Then they cross the angles, 4 lines of settings, comes into all levels. That's where it comes Merkaba, tetrahedron, tetrahedron, octahedron, tetrahedron. Okay, interactions. There's your stargate. All right. So once it comes to stargate, stargates come signal. 3 centers, 4 tractions, 4 divisions, 5 set lines, and travel communication lines of 7. Okay, and then crosses angles and set lines of communication lines of flux. And remember, this is all happening inside your eye. Okay, in settings of panel. Seconds, minutes, and hours of adaptations. So we cross the angles, we set the windows and frames, and outline signal location settings. So the zeros and ones come out of the box frame of triangulation system. Okay, they come outside interactions. Okay? Remember I told you when I was communicating with the TV and the TV was communicating with me through a blue aura, and you saw the zeros and ones come out of the TV? Well, that's what it is. So the more spectrum of the set position, everything you see comes out of frame. And the more you get out of resistance, the more you see the actual setting. When everything comes out, you start living your cycles in the line position of the game itself. So it's actually amazing when you start to see it in a force structure division location to a system. All through triangulation box frame, through portals and stargates, into your planets, into your divine, right? So there you go. That's what's going to happen in setting sequence, all in order. All in chronological order. Okay, from tomorrow in setting sequence, setting lines next Friday in sequence, position of 2-week and track centers, location settings, and set tractions. Okay? I know it's complicated, but if you get a really good understanding, you know exactly what's going on in travel. Yes, it is amazing, isn't it? So everything that you see is coming outline. Outside now, right? So if you have zeros and ones here in sideline like that, it all comes out now. It's all coming out. Okay, it's all coming out, right? And that's all it is. Right? Your whole life is coming inverted inside line setting now. We start with the zeros and ones. Zeros and ones are coming in its own plane, mechanism, location, setting. But that's I want you guys to just stay in the observations to understand how to communicate to your highways in the simulation that you are in that communication system. So everything comes out of frame inside line communications. All right, so you start to see everything come out of the TV setting of process communication. Okay? Foregrounds, setting lines of sequence, lines of setting. Okay, sets communication lines and grounds of service. Okay, crosses, angles, process communication interference. Setting lines of zero, lines of ones over contractions, over division, and location system and travel. Okay? Crossing all different angles of travel communications. Okay, this is all through a TV. Setting communication line grounds, high lines of setting, process lines of indication setting. There's your pyramid and travel communications. All through grounds of surface. Okay, and then you get upline centers, high process in position location setting. Center course centers, there's another pyramid and set tractions. Okay, and you set up another pyramid, 4 pyramids set up in the ceiling and set communications. Right? Set calculation lines of grounds, the pyramid line course centers of panels, communication lines of east lines, west line communication to servers and travel. So that's calculation ground centers, high positional levels, graphics communication lines and settings, and travel communications. Okay? High signals, line communicates inside travel communication. Okay, but that's what it's going to look like in travel. And this is all through TV. This is all happening through a TV, guys. So the TV is going to get in its position to its hotel golf, get in its complacements, get in its compliance, get in its divergence, allegiance, and alliance, and come back to what it always is, the VR system. It starts living in the VR. And once you recognize these things, and once you get out of the resistance, you start to see everything around you come out of setting. So the out is the inversion inside the mind. That's how you start to see everything through testimony. That's how you see everything through phenomena. When I put my hand out, you see the zeros and ones come out of the grounds, right? So that's your reality coming this way. And everything around you is all going to be digital and analyzed. So once you get in that position, everything becomes AI generated. That comes in the carbon, silicone, the crystalline, the anti-mantle, the anti-carrying, and the ultra-skelter. All through tractions, all through its TV and traction. Okay? All through TV, guys. All through TV on platform. Right? So everything you see in that position location is not coming out. Same with the tree. Okay? The tree is going to be out like this. Okay? And then it comes out more like that. Right? And then it comes into its grounds, electrical line grids, high core centers, Mother Earth comes in, line rotation, surface, and Earth. rotation through its cycles, high core center, electrical lines, a high position location line, calculation setting, travel endpoint lines of graph, center grid, energy grid, power grid, core center, mystical grid, communication lines, the high electrical line, high interference, high infusion, travel endpoint lines of graph, calculate, modify, cloud line, high line, position location, measure meters, line screen, adaptation lines of flux over screen. The simulation. And then you actually see the crop circles and what they really are in set tractions, right? And you're standing here in set position inside the system, okay? Seeing what's going on, but you're just observing and watching. So you're not going up to hug a tree. You're not bypassing a tree. You're just staying right there. You stay right there. Don't do anything until you know exactly where you are in your perimeters and parameters. Okay, so you can't bypass anything anymore. You stay in observation, you stay still. You don't move. You observe first of what you're seeing, and then you move. But you use it through your mind of intent, because as soon as you're moving, everything's moving with you. So that's a true understanding, right? When you're in the box game, okay, this is position, location, setting. You see the horizon, right? Okay, so you're here, right? This is you. Okay, in that position. That's you, right? Now, the background is moving, but you're still, right? No, you're in circulation, rotation, going with the background altogether. So wherever you go, everything goes with you in rotation, in the circulation. That's why I want you guys to stay in observation when you actually come into the game itself. Because the thing is, when you're looking, you're only looking at straight view. But when you're looking all around, all at once. That's mass and volume. So it gets very confusing if you keep adapting to the old pattern. You have to understand the pattern recognition of space and time. So once you understand that, you've seen everything as circulation, rotations all at once when you're in the platforms of the game itself. You're on top of the game. This is you. Okay, that's you in settings. Okay, that's you, right? Now, when you're entering a level of a game, okay, this is a game level, travel. Let's just get set position, location, travel, communications. Okay, that's the level of the game, right? You're looking at the game, right? You're observing the game. You're just looking at it. You're not walking inside the platform of the game. You're just observing everything around you. Okay? That's what you have to understand. Standing still processes everything. If you're in a forest, there's trees, there's bushes and travel, right? And you're here and you bypass. Okay? That's a no-no. Okay? So you don't walk. You observe and look at everything first, the perimeter and parameter. Okay? Then you get in position, location of travel. Okay? That puts all position of your pyramids in travel communication, inside traction. Okay? Setting grounds, high lines is set, position, location, measure, and scale. Okay? Process electrical line, grid lines, communication setting to its position. All through tractions, right? So again, don't bypass anything. You walk in, you're here, and you're just observing the platform to set position. Right? So you're here. You do not walk on the platform until you identify your perimeters or parameters of what you're looking at. So you don't go here, you stay here. You observe the three angles of point lines of the graphs of the game. Okay, then you enter the game, right? Then you know exactly where you're going to be doing next because it's already done through its equation. That's where it gets very confusing because the body has already set up the game itself in traction. So it knows exactly where to go. But if you're bypassing everything, you're missing everything in travel communications. Okay? So it's about observing and know exactly looking at things first. This is going to help you and understand everything around you governs its own space. And then you realize, wow, General's right. I'm understanding now because everything around me is in its own operation that governs its own space of time. It's in its own phase facades. It actually does make it rain. But if I want to control the rain, I have to surrender and submit to its current of its flow. Now I'm in control of the rain. You understand that now? Now it's much easier for you to process, but it's going to be much harder for you to understand these things. You can't bypass anything. You just can't get excited and think that you know exactly what you're doing when you're actually inside the game itself. It's more confusing than ever. Your whole life is going to be actually the simulation of itself. So for you to understand that is for you to understand how to modify that, is to use your telepathy wherever you go in that position. So for example, you're looking at your car, you're not realizing your car is not there because it's traveling somewhere. You don't just get in your car. You communicate with your car first from outside the window. Then you go inside the window. But you always observe first. You don't touch anything. You don't even touch your car. You understand? Because it's still traveling. And as soon as you put your handle on that car, you are traveling through that car of its dimension. And as soon as you get in that position, you're misdirecting yourself to your highways. Right away. Right away. Okay? So what you guys are used to, you can't do anymore. It's much easier to control a game inside and play it from outside. But it's a lot harder to understand the game when you're inside, projecting it from outside. But outside is now in, and inside is now out. Okay? So the actual reality is now going to be the actual simulation to your simulators. Interactions. Okay? So it's a total switch now, guys. This is mind determination system, how you go through the mind of inception. Okay? All through your highways. Right? So that's what it is. Everything you touch is constantly traveling in its own system. Right? So you observe first, and you know it's still traveling, and then it comes back to you, which means it's parked, which means it's in a hotel, which means it's docked, which means it's in its hangar bay. You understand that now? Now, you can get in conversion of communications, talking to each other one-on-one, right? So it's kind of like you're in the position of the car, you see the car parked, but that's all you know. But when you're in simulation, in that position, your car is not there. It's traveling on its own. So what you have to start identifying, it has its own operation of its own travel. And everything you touch, you know exactly what you're going to be coming into. Its own recognition of its own space of time. And for you guys to identify that, it's just to stay in observation until you really understand how to understand the game, the instructions, the characters, and the players that you bring inside your game. Okay? Yes, you have to really start controlling the flywheels. Okay? And know exactly in that position locations, because everything you touch is constantly traveling. But for you to identify that, you know exactly where it's traveling. That's why things start disappearing around you and you have no idea what they're doing. They're all traveling on their own. Just because you see the TV doesn't mean it's there that you can turn it on. Because it's traveling to its own destination. It's traveling on its own system. It's traveling on its own highway. It's traveling its own Neuralink. It's traveling its own simulation. You travel in your realities, it travels in its own realities. But if you want to communicate with it, you have to threaten and surrender. Submit and surrender. And commit yourself. Okay? And then you come into the consciousness. Then you come into the awareness. Then you come into the telepathy. Then you come into the telekinesis. Then you come into the intent. Okay? Because you're taking yourself out of observation. And you better know what you're doing. Because everything around you is now listening to you. Ooh, okay? So it's a totally different operation now. You are the operators. But you're going to find exactly everything around has its own operation system that does its own travel. So this is where it comes into modification when you start touching things, seeing things, hearing things, feeling things, eating things, drinking things. You've got to get control. It's just to observe first. Don't know exactly what you're doing before you go into the parameters of everything that you see. Okay? That's all it is in traction. And the more you identify that, the more they identify you. Okay? Through its conscious of its awareness, what you're coming in interactions, right? So there's a lot going on now. So it's a lot more understanding what you guys have to really get balanced with, right? Where you really just have to stay in observation and just look at everything around. And when you can start controlling that, then you can perceive consciousness and bring things in at a particular, specific of a setting. You take things in one at a time. Because if you don't, and you want to communicate with everything, whoa, you're connecting with everything in frequency harmonics, and your ears are like, you have no idea what's going on. And your body is trying to understand what's going on. Okay? Because you're not taking time of what you're seeing in provision. Okay? So, there you go. Hopefully that helps you out and a lot more in communication system. Yes, you come into low line centers, you come into your failures and your humilities. Because everything outside, okay, is now going to be in simulation. Okay? Very powerful stuff, isn't it? See you guys in 5.